I'm with the architecture office called BIG, or BIG for short. We actually number about 120 people at the moment with offices in Copenhagen and New York. We actually are made up of about 20 nationalities. So I'm sure that many of you who are sitting here in the audience, that there's actually some of your countrymen that are and women working right now in Copenhagen to actually address exactly how we inhabit our spaces. How do we increase the quality of life? So BIG is led by Bjarke Ingels. He's on your right. We have a very sort of open office space where we share a lot of ideas, not only with the architects, but also with a lot of the consultants that we bring in for the different projects that we do. So we really enjoy what we do, and we really enjoy having fun with the projects that we do. So one of the first projects, or the first project that we were involved in, was the Copenhagen Harbor Bath. And that was actually in connection with Lars and the Lokale and Anlægsfonden, together trying to find a way to take Copenhagen, which was an industrial harbor city, and where people were actually moving away from the water because it smelled, it was polluted, all of the industry was placed along the waterfront. And actually within one generation, within one decade of setting a goal to clean up the canal, then actually having an architectural competition to create a harbor bath so that the people could be reintroduced to water as an amenity and not as a sewage canal. And so what you see during the months of June until early October is actually an amazing life that now takes place along the water's edge. We call it Copencabana, so that people sort of walk down onto the edge of the water and with their families up and down. So we really, since our first projects, have dealt with sport, movement, public space, and architecture. One of the projects that was also addressed earlier was the expo in Shanghai. And we did the Danish Pavilion. Many of you who've ever been to World Expos know that usually these pavilions are actually boxes filled with political propaganda. And we really felt that instead of looking at beautiful pictures of beautiful people doing beautiful things, we actually wanted people to do the things, to actually experience what it was like to be living in a city like Copenhagen. So we used the pavilion as a sort of a means to experience live, in real time, the qualities that we really like. So the question that we asked ourselves is, what could a country of 1.3 billion people be interested in a country like Copenhagen, or like Denmark, with 5.5 million people? So we began first with kind of an analysis. You have Denmark, you have China, you have a very large country, landmass, and you have a very small country. This is 1970s Shanghai behind me, and this is Shanghai today. So it's actually sort of the importance of the bicycle and the movement through the urban space has really been outlawed now, and everyone is really seeing the car as a sort of means of personal achievement. This is 1970s Copenhagen right here behind me, and this is Copenhagen today. So it's actually done the reverse. It's actually let go of that means of transportation of taking us through and moved back to the bicycle. Now we're at about around 35 to 37% of commuters that are bicycling to work and to school, and the hope is for 50% by 2015. And if you actually go out to Copenhagen, you're going to see that it's a massive construction site where we're actually creating a paradigm shift of widening the bike paths wider than the roads. So when you're now driving through the streets of Copenhagen, you're going to know who's more important in the pecking order. So what we wanted to do for the pavilion was to actually make it a embodiment of these Danish values. So the entire pavilion was the only pavilion out of 200 where you could actually bike through the exhibition. You could get on one of those city bikes that you see all around the city, and you could actually bike through or walk through the pavilion. Now, if I were to say, well, does that really sort of implement, or does that really speak to what's going on in Copenhagen? I'd I'd like to show you a project that's only less than a kilometer away from where we're sitting right now. It's actually in that direction. It's at the southern edge of Copenhagen, and it's called the 8 House, which is this house right here. Now, imagine building a house in your city with 500 apartments. That means about 1,000 people will live there, and there's not a single parking space in the building. That is not us, the architects, it's not the developer, it's actually the city of Copenhagen that has made this kind of decision. Now, the people have a choice. They can take the metro, which runs 24 hours, 7 days a week, every 6 to 8 minutes, or they can bicycle. But the likelihood is that they're going to take either public transportation or a bicycle. If they do take a car, they can park it, but usually it'll be parked in a park house that's sort of separated from the building that they're actually in. So this is also like social engineering at its finest. So here is a place called Ørestad. This is the whole area that includes the Bella Center, and this is our 8 House. And you can see that you can bicycle up this ramp all the way to your 10th level penthouse apartment, or better yet, you can bicycle down. It's a little easier. So how did we achieve that exactly? If you take a look, we have 3 different types of housing. We have penthouses, apartments, row houses, and what we call retail is the gray. So if you look at what sort of program needs, retail program needs a certain depth to be viable. And the row house that we placed on top only needs half of that depth. So we have room for either green space or the ramp. Then we put a layer of flats or apartments, which have balconies on both sides, and then we put penthouses on top of that. And again, the penthouses aren't as wide as the flats, so again, we have enough space. So my colleagues here, they're going to go up. This is a public path, open and accessible to anyone, to actually walk up this building, and then all the apartments are sort of happening off to your side. Now the next question is maybe, would anyone live there? Well, out of the 500 apartments that opened up about a little over a year ago, over 400 have been sold. And so there already are 600 to 800 people living in the building, actively taking part in this ramp. It takes a street from the street and puts it into the sky. So you can now bicycle, skateboard, a little bumpy, but you can actually have motion up and down the building instead of taking the elevator. And you find actually on the weekends that people not living in this building, living in other parts of Copenhagen, actually come out to the building just to sort of take that walk up, because that's a view that very, very few people actually have in one of the flattest countries in Europe. So it's a project that we also feel, what's interesting is that what I showed before, the bath, was done by the public sector. The pavilion was actually a combination of both private and public entities. And this is a purely private financed building. And so all of these people, private and public and both, are actually interested in how to activate the public space. So here you can see the different layers, and there are 2 courtyards in the building as well, and then the views out to the protected open space. So another project that we actually did with LOA, with Lars and his crew, is a project called Shacket. Shacket is a Danish word for crew. So if you're in a group, a gang, a crew, then you sort of relate to this space. It was a grassroots effort. It was basically a lot of immigrant youth and families that had moved to a certain area of town, and the families and the youths were looking for something to do. So they took over an old mechanics warehouse. It's funny how mechanics warehouses really play a lot into sort of sporting facilities. But they basically took this old warehouse and they put in a Thai boxing ring. They put in a sort of jumping ropes and all kinds of things. And they actually had, for many years, one of the most active youth programs in the entire city. Copenhagen municipality took notice and said, we're going to help you finance through the LOA into upgrading this facility. So pictures on the top are of the before, and pictures down below are the after. And so this is a project that really wants to provide the youth of this neighborhood a place to go after school, so it takes them sort of off the streets and doing dumb things. It also tries to bring them in with sport and then use the time that they're actually in the facility to take and squeeze in some computer software programming and programs so that they actually also learn some tools. So it's just outside of the downtown area in a site called Northwest. And it was part of a program in order to sort of, like with acupuncture, to sort of upgrade certain areas of town called Kvarterloft. And it's sort of in the backyard of this area. So we put a sort of wrap studio in a container and placed it on top of the two sort of barrel roofs, so that the kids could actually go up into the sound studio and mix their own pieces or their own music. You can also see that we sort of took cues actually with the color from the actual graffiti that was painted everywhere. So we really looked at the color palette and then really brought that color palette back into the facility. So you have girls and boys bathrooms, and then just it's an all-purpose use. There are probably between 200 to 300 youths that come into the facility any given week to take part, and they have cultural programs for young and old. The facility uses and integrates a lot of sort of very inexpensive materials. It gets a lot of wear and tear, so the idea is that it actually is really, really useful. Another project that we're doing, which is not architecture at all, but rather open space, is actually a area that was previously where a train track went into the city. And it was sort of a city train that took people from place to place. That train track was then sort of decommissioned, and streets took over the need to get people from one place to the other. And as you can imagine, with these kinds of rail yards, it became kind of a really nasty place to be. It was where folks went to do things that they couldn't do anywhere else. So, and it's also the area probably in Copenhagen that has the highest sort of gun rate, of shooting rate. Not something that Copenhagen wants to sort of put out. But they actually put out a competition that said, please activate this room. And so we teamed architects with landscape architects and with artists. And the three of us did not so much do art and landscape and buildings. Instead, we curated the space. We were like thinking of how to activate that open space. So we broke it into three parts, what we call the red square, the black market, and the green park. And that's 1 kilometer long from the southern tip to the northern tip. And what we did was we actually asked the people who live there. There are over 60 nationalities that are represented in that neighborhood. We asked them through newspapers and through open forums to tell us about pieces of urban furniture, tell us about lights, tell us about telephone booths, litter boxes, bollards, anything that they would find in their own country, and bring those suggestions back to us. So we actually got over 1,000 people who came in with suggestions of what they would like to see in the actual urban space. And that's what we did. We took the urban space, the red square, black market, and green park, and we actually just put all of those 60 objects. We chose one object, or filtered those objects down to 60, one representing each nationality, and placed it along that open space. If you think about many of the tensions that have really hit a lot of us in Paris 2 years ago, in London just last summer, these issues of urban integration and of like doing things for the different neighborhoods, this is actually one of those projects that actually is trying to build bridges, trying to find ways to sort of integrate and have also respect for all of the countries and nationalities that the people are coming from. So here's it's currently still under construction, so there's parts of it that are finished, other parts that are still in the works. This is the red square. As it looks, the black market is almost finished and the green part will be planted in the spring. Here are some of the pieces that the people actually suggested. This is a swing set from Estonia. that we've put in. This is a wonderful family sort of swing from Iraq that we have 4 of. This is actually a little bit suspicious. This is an elephant slide from Chernobyl. When we actually went to pick it up, they said it was too radioactive. So we had to have a local metalsmith build another one to its specs. This is the actual sign from the Red Square in Moscow that we brought back. A litter box from the UK. These are bollards from Ghana, which are now sitting in Copenhagen. This is very funny. We have a love seat from Spain, I believe. So the people are actually sitting one this way and the other one this way, looking at each other in a loving manner. This bench is from Brussels. So it's truly like everyone looking at each other, the other direction. So it speaks a lot to sort of the political environment of Belgium. Here are some telephone booths from Brazil. A wonderful slide that was recommended or suggested to us from someone from Japan. We actually had the same Japanese constructors come and build us one in Copenhagen. Bus stops from Armenia. A Moroccan fountain, snow blowers from Utah. So you can actually, when the temperature is right, make snow in the open space. And then, of course, a donut sign from the United States, which is now sitting in Copenhagen, and a dentist sign from Qatar. So the people really have begun to take ownership of this place. And it's really going to be interesting to see when it all fully opens up this July, what it's going to be. So I'm going to show you next actually a advertisement that went through the Danish a little bit harder than that. Just to say that, just in this facility where you're sitting right now, in 2009, we had a climate conference. There's some very sort of impressive-looking people behind me. You can see from the faces of Merkel and Gordon Brown and Sarkozy, even Obama's not too pleased, that the climate conference in many ways failed. It failed at that we were hoping and putting our faith that countries, nationalities could solve this issue at that level. We discovered that they basically don't have the institutions or the facilities to do that just now. So instead of saying we're sorry to the next generation, our feeling is to actually become involved on a regional level or on a local level. So that's the argument in Brussels at EU, really trying to engage in architectural ways. How can architecture and design be actually something that makes us think in a sort of a more energy conscious and resource conscious way. So the way that we actually think about shaping our cities is that when you go to the supermarket, you buy frozen chicken. And the frozen chicken, freezing chicken actually creates heat. And that heat today is actually pushed out into the street. So we actually use energy and then we actually just throw it away once we've actually used the energy once. Our hope is to create cities where there are energy loops so that the frozen chicken air from the supermarket gets pumped to a swimming pool that sits above our supermarkets and heats the pool so you can have a heated swim any time of the year. And, or vice versa. You can sort of put together and see that cities which we've designed today, monofunctional cities where you live in one place, you work in a second, and you play in a third, that's something that we need to sort of mix and match and bring together again. So we call this hedonistic sustainability. Basically that sustainability doesn't need to hurt. It doesn't mean taking fewer hot showers or taking fewer flights. It's actually that if you actually create a higher quality of life, then, and you are more resource conscious, then you can actually create something that is also energy conscious. This is a woman who has probably the unsexiest job on the planet. She is the director of a waste-to-energy plant here in Copenhagen. So she takes our waste, our rubbish, and she converts it into electricity. So every day there are lots of these facilities throughout Denmark. The one thing that she did, which was sort of unique, is that she held a competition for architects to be involved in waste-to-energy plant. And she actually said that she wanted architecture which should be a gift to the city. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never heard the words waste facility, architecture, gift to the city in one sentence before. So it was a real sort of a wonderful experience to be a part. Most often, these facilities are designed by engineers. No disrespect, but there's also a lot of qualities in terms of urban qualities, in terms of thinking about associations, when the engineers are really there to sort of solve the problem of efficiency and of the machinery of the complex. So most complexes in Denmark basically look like boxes with smokestacks attached to them. Now, when you think that in Denmark we don't have so much land, so we can't really do landfill. The United States places its trash, 99% of it, into the land and recycles 1%. So against that, we actually here put 4% into landfill. We recycle 42%, and we have 54% that gets burned and converted into electricity. And what's interesting is that this facility, this is downtown Copenhagen, this facility is just adjacent to the city, and even the queen who sleeps here, she looks out at this facility from a bedroom window. So basically it does need to look good if it's so close. So 400,000 tons of trash go into the facility every year, and 550,000 people can turn on the lights every year. So because its placement in the city, it becomes an urban issue. And if you think that the building will actually be the largest volumetric building in all of Denmark, it's 100 meters high, and it's seriously the biggest building by far of any of the bigger of the sort of Danish projects. So, is it really sustainable that the Danes actually drive 8 hours to the north of Sweden to go skiing for maybe a day or two, and all they do is ski 100 meters down the hill, and then they drive 8 hours back? So we were thinking that if we already are building a building that's 100 meters tall, why not place the Swedish ski slope on top of our building? We have mountains of trash, and we love mountains of snow, so why not combine the two? And so that was our proposal in this project, was to sort of have the facility. The dream or the vision was to place the ski slope on top. We'd have green slopes, blue slopes, black diamond slopes. You take the elevator up after every run. You have a sort of a 360 panoramic restaurant at the top, and then you sort of ski down. And you can have all kinds of activities around the facility. You can also use the skiing to actually bring people to the facility and educate them about waste incineration. So here's the facility. The existing one is here, and this facility would replace or take over from the aging facility, which is about 40 years old. So in the winter, of course, Denmark has the climate of skiing, but not the topography. So once we actually raised 100 meters high, we could actually, for 2 or 3 months of the year, actually produce the snow and have real snow to ski on. But what does that do for the other months of the year? Well, we would like to create bikini boarding by actually bringing in sort of a synthetic snow, which is actually not a new technology at all. This is a mountain of trash. This is an actual mountain of trash in the south of France, and they've put on a ski slope, an artificial ski slope. This has already been in use for almost 20 years. And so it's actually using an existing technology and placing it on top of the waste-to-energy plant. So these are ways in which we're trying to sort of, on a small scale, like the Copenhagen Harbor Bath, that's just 300,000 euro, to this, which is actually about 650 million euro, really trying to, or Danish kroner? Danish kroner? Yeah, I think Danish kroner, sorry. So we're trying to, at sort of the small scale and the big scale, to make an impact. And I'd like to end with a project that is even smaller than anything I've shown you, and is in the heart of Times Square. And it also speaks to how we see the ability to really connect with people on a sort of small level. This one you can turn up a little bit. This was for Valentine's Day, and we created a heart that only beats when you actually touch it. You can turn up the music.